60 million years ago, in a swamp that no longer exists, something is moving through the water. It does not swim near the surface. It does not crawl along the bank. It moves through the warm, slow current the way a shadow moves, without sound, without effort, without warning. It is longer than a school bus. It weighs more than a ton. At its thickest, its body is as wide as an oil drum, and it is the largest snake the world has ever produced. But here is the first strange thing. This animal could not survive in the world you are living in right now. Not because we hunted it, not because we destroyed it, but because the planet itself has grown too cold to hold it. For years after we found it, we told ourselves a simple story about this snake. A giant, a monster, a strangler of crocodiles. Almost everything in that story turned out to be wrong. It did not hunt the way we assumed. It did not kill the way we were taught snakes kill. And it may not, anymore, even be the largest. This is the story of Titanoboa, and of the burning world that built it, a world we are only beginning to understand. To meet this animal, we have to travel to a time and place almost no one thinks about. 60 million years ago, northern Colombia. The dinosaurs are already gone. The asteroid has already fallen. The great reptiles that ruled the Earth for over 100 million years are millions of years dead. And in the wreckage they left behind, the world is doing something unexpected. It is getting hotter. Along the northern edge of South America lies one of the very first rainforests of the modern world. A sprawling, steaming wetland of slow brown rivers and dense green canopy, where the air sits heavy and wet and warm. And we would never have known it existed, if not for a coal mine. In 2002, a team from the University of Florida and the Smithsonian came to the Cerrejón coal mine in La Guajira, one of the largest open-pit coal mines on Earth. They had come looking for ancient plants. What they found instead would rewrite an entire chapter of prehistory. One of the scientists noticed a fossil sitting in the mining company's display cabinet, labeled simply as a petrified branch. It was not a branch. It was a jawbone. The jaw of an extinct crocodile-like predator called a dinosaur. He photographed it through the glass because no one could find the key to the cabinet and sent the picture north. And the moment the team saw it, they understood. Land fossils of this age had almost never been found anywhere in tropical South America. This was a window into a lost world. So they dug. And among the bones they pulled from the black coal were enormous vertebrae, wide, heavy, the size you would expect from a crocodile. For a while, that is exactly what they were labeled, crocodile. Until a snake specialist began unwrapping one of the backbones and realized the proportions were impossible. This was not a crocodile. It was a snake. A snake whose single vertebra dwarfed the same bone in a fully grown anaconda. In the end, they recovered 186 fossils, pieces of more than 24 individuals. It was called the find of the decade. Some compared its importance to the first discovery of Tyrannosaurus rex. But to understand the snake, you have to understand the swamp that fed it. Because this was not an empty wilderness. It was one of the most productive ecosystems of its age. The warm rivers teemed with fish, including lungfish and giant bony fish, some of them enormous. Turtles the size of a small car drifted through the shallows. One of them, Carbonemes, carried a shell nearly 2 meters across, with jaws strong enough to crush bone. And there were crocodile relatives everywhere, the dinosaurs, several different kinds, from slender fish hunters to broad-skulled giants. All of that life, all of that energy, concentrated in one hot, wet, teeming basin. A world like that does not simply allow a giant predator to exist. It produces one. So how big exactly was it? We have never found a complete Titanoboa, no full skeleton, no single articulated body. What we have are the bones of its spine, and for an animal like this, that is enough. Because in snakes, size is written directly into the vertebrae. A larger snake does not grow more bones, it grows bigger ones. And by comparing those giant vertebrae to living snakes, scientists could reconstruct the animal around them. The result? A body close to 13 meters long, perhaps as much as 14. A weight estimated at over 1,000 kilograms, more than a ton of muscle. At its widest, its body would have risen to roughly the height of a human hip. These are estimates built from bone and proportion, but they are careful ones, and they all point to the same conclusion. This was the largest snake that has ever lived. But size on this scale is not free. It demands something from the world. Titanoboa, like every snake, was cold-blooded. It could not generate its own body heat. It borrowed warmth entirely from its surroundings. And the larger a cold-blooded animal grows, the more heat it must absorb just to keep its body running. There is a ceiling to this, a point where the surrounding climate simply cannot supply enough warmth to power a body that large. For a snake to reach 13 meters, the entire world around it has to be hot, relentlessly, permanently hot. And that single requirement, that a body this size needs a furnace to live in, is what makes Titanoboa far more than a monster. It makes it a measurement. But we will come back to that. Because first, there is the question of what this animal actually did. And here, almost everything we assumed was wrong. When Titanoboa was first found, the picture seemed obvious. A snake the size of a bus, living in a swamp full of crocodiles. Surely this was a monster that wrapped its coils around those crocodiles and crushed them. An anaconda, scaled up into a nightmare. For years, that was the assumption. Then the skull began to emerge. Snake skulls are fragile, thin, delicate, almost never preserved. For a long time, we had Titanoboa's body, but not its head. When fragments of that skull were finally studied, they revealed something nobody expected. The shape of the palate, the number of teeth, the way those teeth attached to the jaw, loosely, weakly anchored. None of it matched a crocodile crusher. All of it matched something else entirely. A specialist in catching fish. These were features found in modern fish-eating snakes, and in no other boa on Earth. The largest snake that ever lived was, most likely, a fisherman. And it makes sense of everything around it. The endless rivers, the giant lungfish, the bony fish filling the warm shallows. Titanoboa most likely spent its life in the water, too heavy to move easily on land, lying in wait like a living current, taking fish as they passed. That does not mean it was harmless to the rest of the swamp. An animal this size could still take a crocodile or crack the shell of a giant turtle when the chance came. But its everyday life was quieter and stranger than the monster we first imagined. Less a strangler of giants, more a patient, enormous ambush hunter of the deep channels. And when it did need to subdue something large, it killed the way all boas kill, by constriction. But even here, even in the one thing we were certain we understood about snakes, we were wrong. For generations we believed constrictors killed by suffocation, squeezing tighter and tighter until the prey could no longer breathe. a slow death. Then researchers finally measured what actually happens inside an animal caught in a constrictor's coils. And the truth was far faster and far stranger. The snake is not stopping the breath. It is stopping the blood. Within seconds of those coils tightening, the prey's blood pressure collapses. The heart can no longer push against the crushing force. The flow of blood to the brain simply stops. The animal does not slowly suffocate over minutes. It loses consciousness in seconds and dies not long after. It is, mechanically, one of the most efficient killing methods in the natural world. No venom, no claws, just pressure, applied with lethal precision. Now imagine that force, generated by a body weighing more than a ton. Now we can return to the strangest idea of all, the one that turns a dead snake into a window onto an entire vanished climate. Remember the rule: a cold-blooded animal this large can only survive in tremendous, sustained heat. So the scientists who described Titanoboa ran that logic in reverse. If the snake was this big, how hot did the world have to be to allow it? The answer they reached was startling. A tropical climate averaging somewhere between 30 and 34 degrees Celsius, several degrees hotter than the warmest tropical rainforests on Earth today. In other words, the snake's own body had become a thermometer, letting us read the temperature of a world 60 million years gone. It is a beautiful idea, and not everyone believes it. Soon after, other researchers pushed back. An animal this enormous, they argued, could steady its own temperature through sheer size and behavior, moving, basking, sheltering, in ways that complicate any simple reading. A body that big, they suggested, cannot be trusted as a precise gauge of the air around it. And there is even a warning written in the giant turtles beside it. Because the largest relatives of those turtles turn up in cooler ages too, which means heat alone may not explain why the giants of Cerrejón grew so large. The debate has never been fully settled, and in a way that is the most honest thing this fossil can tell us, that a single bone can open a question large enough to argue about for decades. For 15 years, one fact stood unchallenged. Titanoboa was the largest snake that had ever lived. Full stop. And then, in 2024, the ground gave up a rival. In a lignite mine in western India, paleontologists uncovered a series of enormous fossil vertebrae. They belonged to a snake from a completely different family, an ancient group called the Madsoids, that lived around 47 million years ago in yet another hot, swampy world. They named it Vasuki, after the great serpent coiled around the neck of the god Shiva, and its size estimates are staggering. Depending on the method used, Vasuki may have stretched anywhere from 11 meters to 15. At its upper limit, it could have been longer than Titanoboa itself. So, has the crown changed hands? Not quite. Vasuki's individual vertebrae are slightly smaller than Titanoboa's, which is why, for now, the record still rests in Colombia. For now. Because that is how this science works. Every giant we crown is only the largest we have found, so far. And the ground has not finished giving up its monsters. There is one last question worth asking. If the world once grew snakes this large, why are there none today? The answer is the same fact we began with. The world cooled. After the age of Titanoboa, the long greenhouse slowly broke. The tropics lost their extreme heat, and the furnace that had powered these cold-blooded giants was, over millions of years, switched off. And the ceiling that heat had lifted came back down. The giant snakes shrank. The monstrous turtles dwindled. the world settled into the cooler, smaller forms we know. The largest snake that ever lived could not survive today because the planet grew too cold to hold it. But its bones still remember the heat. They are a record of how hot this world can become, and of what it builds when it does. And they leave us with the same quiet question that every fossil asks the moment it comes out of the ground. If a snake this size could lie hidden in a coal mine, mislabeled for years, what else is still down there? What else have we not yet found? And what else are we still getting wrong?